Okay, y'all. So the Department of Justice last week filed a lawsuit against Apple alleging anti competitive behavior through the way that it operates the iOS smartphone platform that's used on iPhones. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the five main areas of concern or examples that are given by the Department of Justice and see if any of those have any validity, in my opinion. A lot of people in the legal community are of the opinion that this lawsuit is kind of hot garbage. And I'm going to try to give you some reasons why through this video. So, just going to sit back, relax, get in the mood, set the vibe, and then talk to you guys a little bit about this whole thing. Because the Department of Justice has to establish two things in order to win. They got to first establish that Apple is a monopoly or that they have a monopoly in this market. The other part of this is if they have a monopoly or are a monopoly in this industry, then are they using their monopolistic power in order to restrict development or access to the technology in a way that is punitive or harmful to consumers? So let's take some time to talk about this a little bit. Five main points that the DOJ is bringing against Apple. And I'm gonna put it up on the screen right now so that you can see real quickly. And I'm just gonna briefly run through them with my thoughts as of right now before any evidence has been presented or anything else has been shown to the public besides what the DOJ has put in the complaint as its allegations. There's five main points: blocking super apps, suppressing cloud streaming services, excluding cross platform messaging apps, diminishing the functionality of non Apple smartwatches, and limiting third party digital wallets. This that you're viewing right now on the screen comes from Statistica that kind of put an infographic together so that you can follow along. I'll provide the link to that in the description below. So let's look at these one by one. We got blocking super apps. Now, if you've never heard of a super app before, don't find yourself in a weird situation or category. A lot of people have never heard that term. It's not really a common term, at least from my perspective, my understanding. But super apps are the types of things that they have, like in China, where they have their, government allowed apps that kind of do everything. You can book a car, you can buy products, you can message people, you can listen to music or whatever. It just sort of rolls a whole bunch of different services all together into one single app. Now, this is the kind of thing that does exist in other countries and is used a lot in other countries. But to be perfectly honest, it's not really something that we have here. And I'm sure that there are always going to be people who want things like that. But the reality is, for the most part, it's not the kind of thing that we here in this country, at least from my perspective, ever have had a desire or need for. And it's also the kind of thing that, in and of itself, could end up creating a monopoly type of situation where if you have one of these apps that really takes off and gets widespread acceptance, now all of a sudden you have one company that is controlling entire industries of buying and selling and daily functioning of life. The next one is suppressing cloud streaming apps, and specifically they're talking about video game playing apps. So if you're not into video games, that's fine. But like Microsoft and Stream, and I think PlayStation also has a similar type of service where you can actually stream the playing of video games from your actual game console, whether it's an Xbox, PS5, or a computer or something else, and you can use the app of the company that is providing that service to be able to go onto, let's say, your phone, a computer, something else, to be able to actually play the game on your console from somewhere else. And these apps are available on Android. They have not been available on iOS. However, in the most recent iOS 17 update, as of maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, Apple did actually add this functionality. So it's a little strange that the DOJ would actually include this unless they're just trying to say, hey, this is something that they did in the past that, is violating this rule, and it should just go towards, the way that the fact finder is going to determine whether or not they've been operating in a anti-competitive way. But this is kind of a non-issue now because they can do this now. So I don't really get why they would include this, aside from maybe just establishing some past bad faith actions. The next thing is excluding cross-platform messaging apps, and they kind of are looking at this in terms of, let's say, for example, like a WeChat, Facebook Messenger, other types of apps where you're able to have that app on one particular phone and another one like iOS and Android. I don't think anyone really uses Windows Phone anymore, although technically I guess they're 2% of the market share, so somebody's out there using it. But like, this is all about having an app that can be on different platforms and people can message each other back and forth with the same features. And this is possible and available. It's just that Apple does not include all the features from its Messages app in terms of providing those features cross-platform to an SMS app that another company may be having on there. And I know that recently, the RCS standard was adopted, which brings a lot of the features that iMessage added that did not exist on SMS, which is the reason Apple created it in the first place. And now that's been adopted as the official standard, and Apple, I think, has indicated that they're going to actually include that at some point in the near future iOS release. But the reality of it is that these are features that Apple added because they did not exist, and the industry as a whole had no desire or impetus to include them back at the time that Apple wanted features like being able to have emojis and reactions to messages and, Apple Pay and things like that. And so they added them into their own service, and surprise, surprise, it's what people wanted. Apple knew that's what people wanted. And then when it wasn't made available as an app on other platforms, then those other people got mad. And that's where you get like the blue bubble and the green bubble thing, where, people have this sort of weird thing, I guess, where if they see that you have like green bubbles, they look at you a certain way. That means you're texting from an Android phone, you don't have all the features and yada, yada, yada. But it's one of those things where, it's a platform advantage, and you have to wonder why Apple is not allowed to have that type of feature on their platform to distinguish it from others, especially when they created it because it didn't exist in the first place, kind of like with the lightning cable. And so it's the kind of thing where you have to question, it's like, well, they did this because no one else was doing it, and just because people like it should not mean that they have to make it available to everyone else to use. Another thing is diminishing the functionality of Apple Watches. Now, this may have some legitimacy to it because you cannot use an Apple Watch on another platform. So, like, you cannot connect it to an Android phone at all. Apple blocks that within the watchOS software. So it's something that's not allowed. And vice versa, if you have an Android watch, the functionality is very limited to the APIs that Apple allowed, and then restricted on some level once the Apple Watch came out. Because before there was an Apple Watch, there were other smart watches like the Pebble Watch. I used an e-ink display. We're going back now like 7, 8, 9 years. I can't even remember exactly. And then Android watches, of course, were made. And those types of things, it's the sort of thing where Apple created a market. Everyone kind of agrees that Apple Watches, objectively, at least from the way the public views them, are better functioning than the Android watches. And again, this one kind of straddles the line a little bit, I'll admit. But I still keep coming back to the idea of they made a superior product that goes with their devices. And it becomes questionable as to why the government would want to restrict a company from innovating, making something great, And the way that it is great is because of it integrating into the ecosystem, into the operating system, and everything else that goes along with the phones. And so opening up to another operating system makes it less likely that the company would want to innovate moving into the future. At least that's kind of the view of this type of situations. And so there's one more, limiting third party digital wallets. Now, this is the one where I think that they may actually be able to move the needle a little bit, because at a time when Apple came out with Apple Pay and the wallet and all that other stuff, you know, it was actually a little bit more less secure with other banking platforms, with digital pay, with NFC payments, and so on and so forth. And so it does kind of make a little bit of sense that when this was first launched, that they did make these limitations for security reasons. With that said, at the present day, a lot of these security reasons have disappeared, dissipated, and it is more questionable now, in my opinion, whether or not Apple should still be limiting this feature based on security concerns. Because I believe that with banking regulations and the way that these banking credit card companies, so on and so forth, are operating, that the security concerns have been addressed and were addressed a while ago. And if anyone's been following what's been going on with Apple in the European Union, they passed a digital marketplace act that takes away a lot of the things that Apple has been doing. That some of the things that the DOJ are suing about, actually, except that in the EU they just sort of passed a law, pushed it out there, and said, hey, now you got to follow it if you want to actually operate in the EU. And one of those things from a while ago was, opening up the payment system to be used by third parties, so that the NFC chip was basically unlocked to be able to be used for processing payments without using Apple Wallet, without using Apple Pay. And it's gone fine as far as I know, as far as I can tell. And, a big thing about that is that the security concerns that once existed, I believe, are honestly gone. So that's the rundown. And, I'll give some final thoughts in a second. Okay, y'all, so let's go ahead and finish this off. It is the next morning, gotten up, got my coffee, had an awesome end to the video that I recorded yesterday. Got home, went to edit it, learned that the mic never actually connected. So I had absolutely no audio. It was just a mouth moving and talking. So let's close this out now. What are my final thoughts on this whole thing with the Department of Justice and Apple? I think that there are two issues. The first is, can the Department of Justice establish that Apple has a monopoly in the smartphone industry? The second is, if they can do that, can they prevail on the counts that they have against Apple for the various different areas that they say Apple is being anti competitive? My opinion is that they probably will have a very difficult, if not impossible, time proving that Apple has a monopoly in the smartphone market. simply because their actual literal percentage of market share does not rise to what most judges would find to be monopolistic. They have about 60%, and typically, when you're talking about monopolies, you're looking at somewhere around the 80 to 90%, and obviously up to 100%. 60% when there's a vibrant and thriving Android market with a whole bunch of different types of phones and a whole bunch of manufacturers. I just don't see them making the argument that Apple has a monopoly. And then the second part, if they are able to get that far, I think that most of the examples that they gave are examples more of smart business and consumer choice than engaging in anti-competitive behavior, because nothing that they're doing is stopping anyone from doing anything, with the exception of some of the restrictions that they place on developers in terms of what they're allowed to include in their apps and not mimicking or copying certain things that Apple has included in the operating system. And in addition to that, I think that there may be a possibility that an argument could be made with regard to the super apps thing, even though no one actually really seems to want something like that. So, those are my final thoughts. Who knows where this is actually going to go? If you're not already subscribed to this channel, I would strongly encourage you to subscribe, like this video, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when I post new videos, especially if you want to see what I'm going to be talking about next week. I'm going to be walking you through my process as an attorney in putting together a terms of service and privacy policy. One of my clients requested that last week, and I went ahead and sort of outlined the process that I go through, the information that I need to know in order to be able to put this document or these documents together. And of course, as a consumer, you can see it on the flip side as to how we think through these things that we make you agree to in order to use the platforms or services that our clients are providing. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.